G'day everyone, my name's Leigh. I'm a professional poker player from Melbourne, Australia. About a year ago now, I started tracking my progress in my YouTube vlog series, and at the time I was a live 2-5 grinder, but because of coronavirus causing the casinos to shut, I've had to make the transition over to online poker. At the moment, I'm grinding 100NL 9 max games, and to give you an idea of what it's like, I've got a brand new hot session that I only played yesterday to go and review for you. There's plenty of interesting spots. I'm keen to go get into all of them with you, so let's get into that. So here is the session that we're going to review today, and as you can see, I did get in 1,527 hands, which is over my 1,500 hand goal, so I'm absolutely stoked with that. That's about where all the positives end, because as you can see, we did lose 722 across this session, which is a very substantial loss. It might even be the biggest loss we've done on the 100NL vlog. It doesn't feel great to lose, especially having such a big loss. I don't want to be too down on myself. Whenever you do have a loss that is this size, regardless if you're playing, well or not, you probably did run bad across the session, and I don't want to blame it all on run bad though, because we'll get into how I played in a minute and see if my decisions did contribute to this large of a loss. And what better time to do that than right now? Let's get into the hands. Okay, so here we are with the first hand of the session. I have pocket fives in the cutoff. I go ahead and open it up to 3, and then I get a call from a loose passive big blind. So it heads up to a flop. That is a banger flop, 7-5-4 rainbow. Checks over to me, and a pretty easy decision to go ahead and c-bet here. Want to try and get max value with such a strong hand. I go ahead and make it 6, and then the big blind calls. So off to the turn, it's 2 of clubs, and then the big blind actually decides to lead out for 6, which is a very small bet at this point. It's less than a third of the size of the pot, out of position. And I think for me, with a hand as strong as pocket fives here, I definitely want to raise. This looks like a blocker bet, which my opponent could potentially be doing with a bunch of 7x hands, maybe a few 6x, since any 6 is an open-ended straight draw, but I'm really not concerned about being behind here. I think if my opponent had 8-6 and they decided to lead, they would use a much larger sizing, and I think that hand would check raise the flop anyway, so really not worried about straights or better sets. So very easy decision to raise here. I go ahead and make it 24. Kind of unsure about this sizing. I could see going smaller just to try and not scare off 7x, but against a loose passive opponent, probably better off just sizing up in general with his strong hands, because they love calling. So I go ahead and make it 24, and then they do call. So off to the river, which is the jack of spades, pretty big brick. They check it over to me again, and now I'm not really sure what the best sizing here. Part of me does want to size down just to give 7x a really good price to call. There is merit to using a larger size against a loose passive opponent. Like I said, they love to call, and you want to capitalize on that for the maximum to try and exploit their loose passive tendencies, and that's what I ultimately decide to go with on this occasion. I go ahead and bet 55, and then they do throw in the call. We're loving that news, and we're going to scoop this pot. Very happy that I did size up on the river, and I think that's the best way to maximally exploit a loose passive opponent. Starting off the session pretty hot there. If only it kept up for the whole session, we wouldn't be in this pickle. So next hand, we get a limp from a loose passive low jack. Then it folds to me in the small blind with pocket nines. Definitely going to go ahead and ISO raise here. I make it 5.5, and then a tight aggressive big blind calls, as does the original limper. So we're off 3 ways to a flop, 8-4 deuce rainbow. With my over pair here, I really could go either way between betting and checking. I decided to bet up here, go ahead and make it 12, just because there is that loose passive limper, and I think they're going to call with pretty much any pair, and they will call with any pair on this street, but a lot of those pairs are going to be scared off on later streets, so we want to try and get max value now. At the same time though, we are out of position to 2 people. Playing it a bit more cautious makes sense as well. Then the big blind calls, and the loose passive player folds. So heads up with the big blinds, the turn is the 6 of spades. The action's on me now, and again, it's another pretty interesting decision whether I want to bet out or just check. I decide to check in this spot to induce bets from my opponent's 8x hands, or if they did make a loose float with something that had a backdoor flush draw, ace jack of hearts, ace jack of spades, ace jack of diamonds. All of those hands are probably going to bet off on this turn to try and get me to fold worse ace highs. There is merit to betting as well. If you do think an opponent is likely to check back an 8x hand, then you're definitely missing value you could get with a value bet here. I just think this opponent is tight, but they are also aggressive, so they might use this opportunity to bluff. I go ahead and check it over to them, then they go ahead and bet 25.5. When the action's on me, I think there's no decision but to just call here. I go ahead and call, then we're off to the river. The river's king of spades, not the best river card in the world. Not only are there overcards to our pair now, but the backdoor flush got in. I go ahead and check it over to the big blind, then they go ahead and bet 53.5. I really think I should be folding in at this spot. The chances I'm behind are very likely. My opponent could have called pre-flop with pocket eights, pocket fours, pocket twos, all flop sets, which I think they would have slow played all of them with the loose passive play still in the pot on the flop. Additionally, they have the ace jack of spades, they have the queen jack of spades, they've jack 10 of spades, 10-9 of spades. All of these hands are in their range, and when we have pocket nines without a spade ourselves, we don't block any of the flushes. It's somewhat possible that they are bluffing with like ace jack of diamonds, which was one of those hands that was a backdoor flush on the flop and then a bluff on the turn. If they are still pushing it here, I like calling more, but a tight aggressive opponent, I don't think they're going for it. The best move here should be to fold. This is the first mistake I make in the session. I throw in the call. Definitely don't like this play. I think I'm behind most of the time on this river. We do get to see what the opponent had, and they flopped a set with pocket eights, so they're going to scoop in this one, and results aside, I still do think check calling the river is a mistake for me here with pocket nines. Next hand, we get an open from a loose aggressive under the gun player. Then I'm right to their left with ace king. Going to go ahead and 3-bet here. I make it 12. I do want to size up to 4x when we are over 200 big blinds effective, even though I am in position. The action gets back around to under the gun, and they throw in the call. So it heads up to a flop of 10-5-5 with 2 diamonds. We have the king of diamonds. When under the gun checks it over to us, it's an interesting decision whether we want to c-bet or not. Some of the reasons I will like checking are, I do think under the gun is going to have a lot of pocket pairs in their range, which are definitely going to call a c-bet now. So we could potentially be value owning ourselves if our opponent does start to fold some of their ace-high hands, which is pretty speculative in my opinion. The reasons I would like betting ace-king is because even if they do fold a hand like king-queen, we're happy to deny equity to that hand. I do decide to c-bet here, but I really could see going either way. I make it 8.5, and then under the gun calls. Turn is the 7 of clubs, which is a pretty big brick. Under the gun checks it over to me, and now I think I have a pretty clear decision to check back. All of the value we got from hands like ace queen, ace jack, they're probably not going to call on this turn if we keep betting, so I really do think betting here would be value owning ourselves. Somewhat possible that we could bluff out like pocket nines, pocket eights, but even like pocket sevens has a full house now, so I'm not really that keen on trying to barrel them off of those specific range of hands when they probably are going to cool down with hands like 10x or pocket jacks or maybe even pocket queens that didn't want to 4-bet in the early position dynamic. So I check it back off to the river, which is the 5 of clubs. The action's on the under the gun player, and they go ahead and bet out. They bet half the size of the pot, and I really do think I should just be folding ace king here. I've explained pretty much on every street that I think my opponent does have a lot of pocket pairs in their range. They could totally just be betting pocket jacks for value here, or a hand like jack 10. Because my hand pretty face up is an ace high hand, so they've only gone half pot to give me a price, and I think we shouldn't pay them off. It's pretty obvious they have a pocket pair, and I can just get away from ace high here. In game, that wasn't the conclusion I came to. I sort of realized that, then I sort of went to the next level and was like, oh, but it's so obvious they have a pocket pair that if they did float with king queen or queen jack, then this is such a good spot for them to bluff with those hands. I just think it's untrue that they're actually going to do it in game at this level. I think they have a pocket pair the vast majority of the time when they bet out on this river. I really should just be folding ace king, but I was on the wrong level in this hand, so I threw in the call, which is, yep, another bad river call in my opinion. But in terms of results, did it work out? No, because my opponent had ace 10 suited. So not happy with the call from a results standpoint, and I hate it even more from a strategy standpoint. Next up, we're in middle position with ace queen offsuit. I go ahead and open it up to 3, and then a tight aggressive hijack goes ahead and 3-bets us to 9. Then we get a cold call from a loose passive cutoff. The The action's on me, and I think I have an interesting decision whether I want to just call or go ahead and 4-bet here. The reasons I would like just calling are because the opponent is tight aggressive, and I think the chances that they're doing this light, it's possible, but I think it's less likely because of their player tendencies. The reasons I actually would like 4-betting are I'm going to get some folds if they are 3-betting light, which I think they will be at least sometimes. And then additionally, we won't have to play the pot out of position to 2 people. And I actually think I can get value from the loose passives cold call. I think if they had any hand stronger than ace queen, they will probably just go ahead and 4-bet themselves. So I do land on a call though, which I don't think is an awful play. I think it's a slight mistake though. So we're off to a flop, which is ace king 8 rainbow. Pretty good flop for us. We flop top pair. Got to check it over the 3-better though. They go ahead and bet 14 and a quarter, and then the loose passive player folds. The action's on me, and I think I have a pretty easy decision to call here, which is what I do. Don't want to go ahead and raise when my opponent has all of the ace kings in their range. So we're onto a turn, which is the 8 of clubs. I go ahead and check it over to the aggressor. They keep on betting at it. They go ahead and bet 28 and a half. So the action's on me, and I still am somewhat concerned my opponent could have ace king, pocket kings, pocket aces, somewhat possible. But even though I'm concerned about those hands, I actually think it's still likely that my opponent could be bluffing. If they did do a light 3-bet with jack 10 suited, queen jack suited, this board is so good for their range. I really think that they're going to be barreling off. So I don't really like folding when I'm getting this good of a price to call. I will say though, I don't think my opponent is value betting a worse hand. Like if they did 3-bet ace jack or ace 10, even ace 5, I think they're going to stop betting on this turn just because they know how strong their range looks on this board. So I think it's a polarized spot. Either we're way ahead of their bluffs, which are mostly gut shots, or we're just crushed by ace king or pocket kings. So I throw in the call off to the river. The river is the third 8. It's the 8 of hearts, and this is an absolutely beautiful river for us. We did completely suck out on ace king. We're chopping with ace king now. The action's on me, and I think in this spot, I think we're better off checking it, trying to induce a bluff from the villain. I think the chances we're chopping are very high, but we might be able to potentially induce a bluff by checking, which is what I do. Then the opponent goes ahead and rips it all in. Easy call off, which is what I do. Then my opponent shows pocket aces. Oh, that is such a sick cooler. I don't know what I can do except for fold the turn. Folding the turn does make sense against a tight aggressive opponent. Even if they are betting a polarized range, it might be tilted more towards just the value hands, but on that river, there's no chance I get away, and it's a pretty sick cooler. The next hand's an interesting one because it actually does sort of carry over a concept from the previous ace-queen hand. Anyway, the action gets to me in middle position with king-queen of diamonds. I open it up to 3. Then we get a 3-bet from the button, who was an unknown opponent. They just sat down at the start of the orbit. They go ahead and make it 9, and then we get a cold call from a loose passive small blind. The action gets back to me here, and it's the same interesting decision we had in the ace-queen hand, whether we want to 4-bet or just call. The reasons I like just calling are there is a loose passive player in the pot and we have position on them already. We're getting a great price to see a pot against them. But the benefits of 4-betting are, again, try and get a bit of value or fold out the small blinds range. Since they're a loose passive player, we probably could get calls from worse hands, even with king jack. But we really don't know anything about the button's tendencies. They could be doing this really tight, they could be doing this really loose. So we can't really do an exploit on them. I think I prefer 4-betting just because there is that potential dead money in the pot, and I decide to go for it. I go ahead and make it 22. Then I get a call from the button and a call from the passive player as well. So we're 3 ways to a flop. It's a pretty banger flop for us. King 9 deuce with 2 diamonds, a top pair and a flush draw. When the action gets checked to me, I want to go ahead and bet for value here. Somewhat concerned that both of these opponents could have a stronger hand like ace king or pocket 9s, but even if they do, we have a lot of equity against that hand with such a strong flush draw. We're ahead of the nut flush draw as well, and king jack and a king queen without a diamond draw are hands we can absolutely get value from. I go ahead and make it 19. Then the button goes ahead and rips it all in effectively, and then the small blind does the same thing. They call off, leaving themselves about 60 behind. So the action's back on me. We're not really loving the situation. Like I said, I think they both definitely have pocket 9s in their range and ace king, but we have so much equity against those hands. We just have to go all in ourselves here. I go ahead and put it in, and then the small blind calls. So 3 ways. turns Jack of Diamonds, there's not going to be any help for us. It's actually a really bad turn for us. Now we lose to the King Jack, and then the river's a 3 of spades, so not really looking good for us, and it's looking even worse when we do see both of our opponents had ace king, so they're essentially going to chop the money that I put in the flop, and clearly this wasn't the best spot to go ahead and 4-bet king queen suited. Right, this is the last hand for the session, and might have left the best for last yet again. So the action gets to a tight aggressive button. They open it up for 3. Then I'm in the small blind with my favourite hand in all of poker. I go ahead and 3-bet aces to 16.5. I'm using a larger size here because I am over 350 big blinds effective with villains, so very, very deep here. Can definitely use larger sizes, get more value, put more pressure on with our bluffs. Then the action's back to the original raiser, and they throw in the 4-bet. They go ahead and make it 48. This is music to our ears with aces here, but we do have a pretty interesting decision whether we want to go ahead and 5-bet or just call. The reasons I would like 5-betting are we're going to be out of position for this entire hand. When you are out of position, it benefits you to lower the SPR because it makes decisions a lot more simple and mitigates the advantage that the in-position play is going to have. The other reason I like 5-betting is my opponent is tight aggressive, so I don't think they have that many light 4-bets in their range, so it's a strong range of hands we can get value from with the nuts. I just like to call though, and I think my thinking might be a bit rigid, but I have been for a while now of the line of thinking I don't want to have 5-bet ranges when we are as ridiculously deep as we are here, because it's going to be pretty obvious that we do have aces at some point when we're 5-betting and 6-betting, so it could be a good spot to just trap sometimes and keep your opponent in with a wider range of hands. There's merit to both lines of thinking, and I wouldn't really fault anyone for choosing either one. So we're heads up to a flop which is 10-4-3 rainbow. I go ahead and check it over to the pre-flop aggressor, which is like another reason I might prefer 5-betting, because then we keep the betting lead and we don't let them play a bit of pot control with some of their weaker over pairs if they do check back. And they do check back, so I do definitely think they have some worse pocket pairs in their range, and then a lot of like ace high, ace king, ace queen, maybe even like ace 5 suited type hands in their range here. So we go to see a turn. The turn is the king of diamonds. I've got to go ahead and still check it over to the pre-flop aggressor. If they do have ace king, I definitely think they're going to bet off on this turn. And they do go ahead and bet, but they go ahead and bet 95, which is just under the size of the pot. So an absolutely ginormous size bet in a 4-bet pot. I think with pocket aces specifically, we do have a pretty clear decision to call, but I am very, very concerned when my opponent is using this size. I said they do have a bunch of those weaker pocket pairs in their range when they check behind the turn. That definitely includes pocket kings. It also could potentially include pocket tens, because pocket tens is a hand they definitely would 4-bet in a button versus small blind dynamic. So I am very concerned about those strongest hands in their range. It is also somewhat possible they're bluffing with ace queen, but then again, like, why are they going to bet a pot size on the turn if they're trying to get me to fold pocket jacks or pocket queens? Like, they could probably do that with a smaller size, you know? It just seems like it looks like I have ace king and they're trying to get value. But regardless, we're off to the river. The river's the 8 of clubs, pretty big brick. I go ahead and check it over to the aggressor, and then they rip it all in. The action's back on me here, and this is an absolute nightmare spot. I don't think my opponent is betting ace king all in for value for this size. I think they're entirely polarized to either a bluff like ace queen, or they have pocket kings or pocket tens. And honestly, to be 100% transparent with all of you, I really do think folding is the best play here with aces. I said on the turn, it looks like they're trying to get max value from ace king, and I really think that's the level they're on. They're a tight aggressive player. They probably play a bunch of poker regularly, and they're not going this aggressive in a spot like this when they can bet a lot smaller and still put maximum pressure on my pocket queens, pocket jacks, even king x hands. Like, if they went ahead and bet smaller on the turn and then they bet like 150 here, that's still a gross spot for queens and jacks. Like, they don't need to keep shoveling money in like this. They got those strong hands, they got those sets in their range. I really think I can save a bunch of money, probably get a huge edge on the field as well by making the fold here with aces. This has been the leak all day for me though. I keep making light calls on the river, and I get needled a lot for being such a nitty player who never pays off, who folds too often on the rivers, but I apparently have gone the full opposite today, including in this hand, because I throw in the call and then we get the bad news. My opponent did have pocket kings, and they got us for absolute max value. And I try not to get too frustrated when things don't go my way on the poker table, but this one really, really hurt. And even though it happened yesterday, I'm still kicking myself pretty hard for calling off on the river here. Really regret it. So those were the most interesting hands across this pretty dreadful session for me, at least in terms of results. But when it comes to gameplay grade, I'm going to give myself a D+. I really didn't like a lot of the decisions I was making, mostly on rivers. When I was making like call-offs, it's not really a leak I ever have. People needle me all the time for being so tight on rivers and never paying off bets and probably losing a bit of EV by folding too much. And I don't feel like I was overcorrecting in this spot. I feel like maybe I was just off my game and didn't realise these were good spots to make exploitive folds, and absolutely have to downgrade myself for that. I'm not going to go too harsh because I did make a lot of plays that I liked, and I do think a large reason for such a bad result, I did run really bad in a lot of those hands. I got absolutely cooled in a bunch of spots, but if I was playing much better on my A game, making the exploitive folds I usually do, I think the results will be nowhere near as bad as they are. So landing on a D+ really does feel fair for my play today. So that's it. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end of the vlog. I really do appreciate you doing that. It helps channels in analytics a bunch. Also, if you haven't already, please hit a thumbs up on the video, leave a comment, needle me for my absolute giveaway session, calling every river a bet when I shouldn't have been, and hit that subscribe button. I promise I'm not always this much of a fish in these vlogs. Go check my other videos and you'll see I do have a fold button on the river most of the time. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.